Hello and welcome to The Point. In this video, we'll talk about the new navigation system being developed in Godot 4. You'll notice that it's a little bit different from the old one, and because of that, several of the classes were changed. And by classes, I mean nodes and resources. And here you are seeing a time lapse of me setting up a CSG scene with some ground, some obstacles, and also including a static body around each object. So just to make sure everything is included in the navigation code. To the left, you can see the Godot 4, it's the new one. To the right, it's the old Godot 3.3. And in both cases, to set up a player, you can use kinematic body as usually is used, or Node 3D or spatial in the old Godot, or also rigid body. All cases can be used in both. And finally, we set up the navigation itself, and here's where you'll notice the differences. On the old Godot 3.3, you set up a navigation instance. Inside it, you use a navigation mesh. You use the navigation mesh to bake a navigation mesh around your scene, which means that your scene needs to be a child of that navigation itself. And finally, you put your player inside the navigation or have your player have a reference to that navigation to be able to calculate the path. But for Godot 4, you'll have a navigation region, which is a little bit different. You include the navigation region node in your scene, also put your map underneath that navigation region so that it can bake the navigation mesh, but instead of having a navigation mesh child of that node, the navigation mesh is now a resource within navigation region node. So you just click new navigation mesh, and finally bake the navigation mesh as you would with a navigation mesh of the old Godot 3.3. And with all that out of the way, you can see here me struggling to implement all the cases, both for the new and the old navigations. All code you're seeing here, you'll find in the description below, including the reference that I took to be able to implement the code you're seeing for Godot 4. Of course, the code depends on how you yourself implement, but comparing my two codes, you'll notice that in my ready function, I needed to set up a map, which is supposed to be solved by the time when Godot 4 is released, but for now this manual process needs to be done for it to work. Also in the physics process, of course, I'm just implementing something very simple here, but you'll notice that on the old version, you need to get the entire path at once, and then you navigate through this path array to be able to go from waypoint to waypoint within your navigation mesh. In the new one, you just get the next location with NavigationAgent.getNextLocation. Something new that you'll notice is that the new Godot 4 player does not have a reference to the navigation itself. Instead, it uses something called NavigationAgent, which means that the player does not need to be remotely nearby the navigation region. And this is the main advantage of the new implementation, because now you'll be able to have multiple navigation regions. Maybe you have a very complex map in a grid map, for example. Each separate area can be its own navigation region. Navigation regions can actually move around, and even with multiple navigation regions moving around compared to each other, the navigation agent is something static within the player. And the navigation agent itself is able to calculate the next location, as you can see in line 26, which means that you don't need to take care of the entire path array, though you can if you really want to. Another difference is, as you can see, instead of just moving and sliding from within the physics process, I actually set velocity at line 31. And the navigation agent itself calls a signal velocity computed. And its result is the actual next step for it to escape all the colliding objects. You can also have moving objects, and within it you can instantiate the new node called Navigation staticbodies, which is used once again in the navigation agent's collision detection within the set velocity. And finally, there's another callback or another signal of target reached for whenever the player actually reaches that target, which means you don't need to do it manually anymore. Some extra notes about this new implementation is that I don't know how the old one worked, but the new one is using a library called Recast and Detour, or more specifically, only the recast part of that library, which is used by many other game engines and also other programs to create the navigation mesh itself, so bake the navigation polygon from collision objects. And from there, Godot uses an A-star algorithm to calculate the path. It is unfortunate that the current implementation is not using the detour part, which includes dynamic pathfinding and other advantages over just pure A-star. But let's see, who knows, maybe in the future. But for now, you can look at this very nice plugin, which actually implements recast and detour at the same time. You can see that the plugin is a little bit old now because the developer is not updating for a while, but give him some love if like me, you'd like to have more intelligent navigation systems within Godot. Thank you for watching.